funding and restoration approaches to benefit Riverside and communities. As I mentioned earlier, the mandatory please silence your cell phones if you have not done so already. We're going to use the same format as yesterday. Each presenter is going to come up and speak, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions following each presentation. Also, as with yesterday, I will be your bad cop presenters with the time cards, making sure we present in a timely manner. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Fatima from Sonora Institute, who will be speaking to us about valuing the socioeconomic benefits of environmental flows, restoration in the Colorado River.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fatima. I am the Environmental and Natural Resource Economist at the Colorado River Delta program in the Sonora Institute. And today I will be talking about Sonora Institute's efforts to promote environmental stewardship by highlighting the socioeconomic benefits of environmental flows and restoration in the Colorado River Delta. So the Delta, where our work is focused, is located in the Mexican side of the Colorado River. And the map on your right basically highlights our conservation priority areas for the next 20 years, which include riparian, estuary, and marsh habitat. And very briefly, our conservation work is based on three main strategies that include on-the-ground restoration activities, efforts to reconnect the river with the sea, and the renewal of the relationship that community members have with the river, which in many cases was lost as sections of the river dried up. So as part of this last strategy, our renewal strategy, we have to continue to work with community members, Delta water users, and other stakeholders to promote long-term environmental stewardship in the Delta. In fact, one of our goals is to create some sort of like an army of environmental stewards, composed of doers to take action, for instance, by volunteering at restoration or tree planting events. Also practitioners to do the day-to-day restoration activities, and donors to provide the financial and in-kind support to ensure that there's long-term restoration in the Delta. So we know that all of these three groups are essential to have sustainable conservation results, but we also know that they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, our almost 20 years of experience working in the Delta indicate that stakeholders from different areas can actually belong to one or more of these three groups. So with this in mind, Sonora Institute evaluated the needs and opportunities to create a mechanism through which the different Delta water users, stakeholders, and community members can directly contribute to the conservation of the Delta. And our analysis suggests that one mechanism is the establishment of a conservation fund for the Delta. We envision a small-scale conservation fund where Delta water users, different users, and donate funds. And at least in beginning stages, our intention is not to replace the existing funding mechanisms, but more complement them. So we know when what would happen. So the main idea is that Delta users can donate funds for in-kind contributions to the conservation fund, which can then be used to implement conservation and restoration projects along the river, with the ultimate goal of having or supporting healthy ecosystems for the benefit of the people, but also the environment. So, how did the idea of establishing a delta conservation plan come about? Well, we all know that fully depending on donations or grants from foundations, government agencies, or philanthropists, it's not a sustainable funding mechanism. So we explored the ways in which we could have recurring contributions, even if they're small scale, from the people who use the river or directly benefit from the river, including fishermen, hunters, or the recreational sector. Second, we also know that in the area, people usually distrust the existing funds, conservation funds. In fact, there is already a conservation plan in place that is managed by the Environmental Protection Agency. However, because the funds or the agency does not have a separate account, these funds are usually used for general administration expenses and not necessarily for conservation. So the people distrust the fund because they don't know where the money is going. So this highlights the need to have a transparent and accountable conservation fund in the area. And third, we know that having a conservation fund that allows Delta users to financially support the ecosystem services they receive and also giving them the security that these funds are actually going to be used for conservation work. Provide some sort of entitlement and ownership of the sites that are being restored with the funds that they donate. We all know that when we pay for something, it reflects the value that we put into that good or service, but it also increases the chances of us taking better care of that product because we actually pay for it. So for this work, we focus on the Hardy River, which is a tributary of the Colorado River. And we focus on this area because it has great potential to become a funding source for the conservation fund. In this photo, the white shapes that you see are vacation homes who are owned by Americans, created from California. Visit the site 2 to 3 times a year. And they have been doing it for several generations now. This is a close-up of the site, and you can't really see it in this photo, but all these homes are very fancy. The owners have small boats, jet skis, and there's even one person that has a small plane. So there is significant investment going on, and economic activity going on at this site. I'm just going to fly to these photos, but this is a recreational site from the Mosquera, which is visited by local recreationists every year. There's an underground pictures. Just highlighting how people use this site. A different site, just like 10 minutes away from the previous one. Okay, so we know that there is the need to have a sustainable financing system for the Delta. And we also have the idea that Hardy River could potentially become a funding source. But how feasible it is to actually establish and fundraise money for such conservation fund? Well, to answer this question, we commented a series of studies to further identify potential funding sources in the different sectors in the area that currently benefit or could benefit from having environmental healthy habitats. One of these sectors was the hunting industry, where we basically, among many other questions, we asked hunters how much they would be willing to donate to a conservation fund in order to maintain healthy delta habitats to support or promote better hunting experiences. So 63% of participants, 83% of participants said that on average they would be willing to donate $109 per season to this conservation fund, having a potential to generate an annual market for $135 every year. This is based on a 83% participation rate. We also survey local people who recreate or visit different areas along the Hardy River and the Colorado River during Easter Sundays. And we basically ask them how much they would be willing to pay to enter these sites per vehicle and ensure there is water to sustain healthy ecosystems that currently exist in the area, and therefore the waterways activities that they carry on at these sites. And this graph shows the results over 3 years. As we can see, the sites of the Hardy River have higher willingness to pay than those in the Colorado River. And this is mainly because willingness to pay was correlated with income. In general, the people that visit the Hardy River have higher incomes. But also, and this is across all the sites, folks seem to value having recreational infrastructure, which was more prominent in the Hardy River. So if we take into account people's willingness to pay from the previous slide, and we assume that 1,800 cars visit each of the sites every year, and this assumption is actually based on the number of cars that visit Mosquera, we can estimate the potential contribution to the conservation fund, which is about 104,000 on average from 2012 to 2014. As part of a different study, we also surveyed people who visit Los Algodones, which is a border town, and they visit the site for medical reasons. So the idea behind this study was to explore the potential of expanding from medical tourism in Los Algodones to ecotourism in the Delta. And we asked participants if they would be willing to take a tour to the Delta, which would include transportation, 2 meals, and a boat ride for bird watching. And 60% of them were willing to take the tour and pay an average of $60 per person. So if we assume 2 days tours with point of age for 100 years, 100 days a year, then the sector has the potential to generate 150,000 every year, of which a small percentage could go into the conservation fund and the rest to basically operate the business. And for our last study, we basically did an inventory of the camps and vacation homes that are found along the Hardy River. And we found significant differences between upper and lower Hardy River. In the upper Hardy, there is more water, better quality, and also there are more homes that are being leased and less abandoned homes. And in general, there's more like economic activity and investment going on in the upper Hardy, which is highly correlated to the water that is in the river. So, based on interviews with vacation home owners, we estimated that along the entire river, lower and upper Hardy, these homes are currently generating over $700,000 every year on leases, utilities, and maintenance expenses. If you only consider leases, then it's close to $273,000. And this area is letting go of the opportunity to generate an additional $105,000 every year from that that are abandoned. So the idea here is to work with camp and vacation owners to dedicate a percentage of the properties to the conservation fund and ensure that these funds are being utilized for activities along the river and keeps the years on the lower part of the river or these sites more like the level Hardy River. So when we put all of these factors together, we can estimate that approximately 287,000 could go into the conservation fund, EPS, that 100% of the donations from the hunting industry and local communities go into the fund. This is open space because we want this time participants, and like 10% of the medical tourists, donations and education homeowners, or even this go into the fund. But before I move on, it is important to know that these estimates are based on false hypothetical willingness to pay. And we know that there's a difference between hypothetical willingness to pay and actual willingness to pay. So we expect this amount to be lower. However, it does provide a general sense of where people, what could be the potential contributions to the fund, and also a starting point to begin talking to the different sectors. So now that we know that there is potential funding sources in the Hardy River within the different sectors, and there's a need for such conservation fund, the next logical question is, who would implement and manage the conservation fund? So we consider several options, and after much consideration and also based on our partners' suggestions, we decided to house a conservation fund within our sister organization based in Mexico, so known as the Mexico ASEM. And there are many benefits in doing this. The first one is that ASE already has a established reputation. It has a good relationship with community members and government agencies from the 3 levels. And also, as a nonprofit organization, there's also more trust from the people. Like I mentioned before, having a conservation fund within the government wasn't working very well with some people. Also, it has the capacity to receive monetary donations and provide past receipts for productions in Mexico. And it already has experience implementing restoration projects in the Delta. So in order to promote transparency, we are currently in the process of formally and also legally establishing an advisory committee, which would be composed of key stakeholders from the different sectors, including amplification homeowners, fishermen, hunters, outfitters, members of the Kuka tribe, government agencies, NGOs, as well as private organizations. And the idea is that the advisory committee, among its many roles and responsibilities, which I will not discuss in this presentation, the idea is that they define, evaluate, and propose restoration projects in the area. And these restoration projects, basically, they would have to define the criteria on what kind of benefits they want from these restoration projects. So, with it, taking into account that these restoration projects will have to have the figures like social, economic, and also environmental impact. I mean, these are people who work in the area already, so they know the area pretty well. They know where the most impact these restoration projects are going to have. And also, one of the key goals of these advisory committee is that they would serve as a liaison between their sector and the conservation fund for fundraising opportunities. And in fact, we already had our first meeting with these potential conservation, potential members from the committee, and they're not only very excited about taking part in this project, but they also already proposed during this meeting some potential mechanisms to transfer money from their sector to the conservation fund, which is great for us. And just to finalize, as I mentioned before, we envisioned, at least in beginning stages, a small-scale conservation fund. So with that in mind, we set what we think are reasonable financing goals for the next 5 years. But who knows, maybe this will really take off in the next 30 years. We want to be something like this is worth that. But we are very excited to announce that we already reached our first year goal of $20,000. And although this money did not come from the users themselves, it came from the Tinker Foundation. It does provide financial funding to begin our third restoration project. And also it gave community potential advisory community members an incentive to continue to fundraise within their own sectors. Very briefly, just to finalize, some of the next steps will be how and we are planning on implementing this year is to formally and legally establish the advisory committee, the first restoration project, which is something that we already have, in order with advisory committee members to fundraise money or either establish a mechanism to which they can the money from their sectors to their and that's that. For me, I do want to mention that the development of these projects, these ideas, and the beginning was funded by the we're very grateful. Are there any questions?
We have time for one question. Okay, I have a question. One, based on these discussions you've had with this development advisory committee, what are the types of restoration projects y'all are prioritizing on the market group?
Yeah, some of the criteria that came up in the first meeting was that it has to have some sort of benefit to the general public. It has to be visible and have access to the general public. It has to be within a certain length from a body of water. And yeah, those were the main ones. Yeah. We know that because there's multiple stakeholders involved and they have different proposed projects along the river. Everybody basically wants to do their spurs or like their area first. But they all agree that there's priority areas within the river that could have the highest benefits. Great step moving forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you much. Our second speaker will be Jeremy Sokolsky, who will be speaking to us about a conservation funding framework to support large-scale restoration and long-term stewardship.